welcome to the Series A list with Rain Ventures, the live webcast where we'll be introducing you to some of the top founders and early stage VCs in the world. I'm Erica Diagnan-Minahan, and I'll be joined shortly by Rain Ventures co-founder Monique Idlet-Mosley. Every month, we feature entrepreneurs and investors that have built amazing businesses and that are generous enough to share their stories and inspire us. Venture capital has long been a closed system, and many startup founders are unsure how or if VC can be a tool to help them grow their businesses. So today and every month, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on early stage venture capital, introducing you to top founders and investors in the space, and answering the big question, what does it take to get to Series A? So with that, I'm honored to welcome our next guest, tech founder and tech innovator, Dilip Rao. Dilip is the founder of Sharebite, a software company designed to help feed hungry people of all stripes. So before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that we're really excited to take your questions at the end. So please add any questions that you have for us to the chat or the Q&A tab. And if you're in the chat, please say hello and let us know where you're tuning in from. So great. I see Monique managed to get into the room. So
I did. I found my way, and I'm excited to get into this conversation because I'm very excited for Rain Ventures to be a part of Sharebite. Oh, so we have Paris going on right now. Someone's calling in from Paris. Yes.
Great. So, to kick this off, we'd love to give you the floor, give you the opportunity to, introduce yourself and say hello to all the folks joining in from all over the world. And we'd love to hear a little bit about your amazing story of what inspired you to become an entrepreneur.
Sure. First of all, Erica, Monique, thank you both for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here and really to be telling the story of Sharebite and the 50 plus entrepreneurs that we have at the company who have tirelessly continued to build and innovate throughout this pandemic. So this whole conversation is really a testament to them, as is our most recent capital raise that we just announced. So by way of background, I grew up in New York City. I'm a product of the public school system. If I had to go even further back, I was born in a small little village in India with a population of about 7,000. So, it's, I count my blessings to be able to tell that story every single day, because, and we'll get right into some of the details of it. But I think the story of Sharebite is really one of resilience, right? And it all stems from the way that Mohsen and I have designed. Mohsen is my co-founder at Sharebite, and we deliberately designed this organization, and we came up with the mission first. And when you start with the mission first, there's a different hat that you end up wearing when it comes to building a business. And so we both, and we're both alums of Columbia Business School, and we met. It was just a happenstance, and we met, and it was just we bonded together very, very quickly. And where we really aligned was creating for-profit businesses to make a difference in society. And there are observations that both of us individually had made through our own sort of experiences. And I shared with them my own personal story and, things that had happened. Really, we're coming up on the 7-year anniversary of a car accident. So July 5th, 2014. And I'll tie all of this together, but really my personal story is that I grew up in New York City, kid from Queens, a product of the public school system. And my earliest encounter with entrepreneurship was really watching my dad. And, when we lived in India, I have a very vivid memory of my childhood. So when we lived in India, he was on the officer track there. He had a good career, good trajectory at the he worked at an organization called Times of India, and his first job when we came to the U.S. was actually selling newspapers in front of MSG, and he proudly did that job, and there was not a single bone in his body that was an ego that said I'm above this, or like I deserve more. There was none of that, right? He was here, and our whole family, we came here the old-fashioned way, green card in hand, advanced degrees, this and that, and our whole family, came here, extended family, uncles, cousins, whatnot. We came here, and there was always this mindset, like, let's hold on to who we are culturally, but we're here to be Americans, right? We're going to do this. We're going to do this properly. And no matter what it took, it was my parents who made it a point to invest in education for their children. And Lord knows, and they're Indian parents, so they'll never actually tell us like the hardships that they went through or the struggles that they went through, early in the early years. But I'm pretty sure that there were nights that my parents didn't eat because they just didn't have anything to, or they, oftentimes I would hear my mom like, "Oh, I'm not hungry," right? And probably wasn't the case. It was because there just wasn't enough. And so fast forward, studied engineering, joined Wall Street, non-traditional sort of background. And I spent about a decade on Wall Street, started my career at Goldman Sachs, spent most of it at Credit Suisse. And throughout my tenure at both firms, I remember being very, very interested in the sustainability, the foundation work that each of those organizations were doing. And I really fell in love with the subject matter that was like, impact, right? And the area that I fell in love with was figuring out, pockets of leverage, right? One major thing that people don't necessarily grasp and try to embrace is the purchasing power of corporate clients, of just companies in general. And the idea for Sharebite really came from a number of our observations that we had made early on. Every company that's out there, whether they're an investment bank or a law firm or a tech company and everything in between, they want to make a difference in the world, right? And since the global financial crisis, and I spent many years recruiting, at the target schools at the investment banks, and we would go to the same schools, and every year the future recruits became more and more vocal about the other side of having a job, which was, hey, I'm excited to join the investment bank. I'm excited to become an investment banker, but I already know what practice areas your firm specializes in, where you're number one in the league tables and whatnot. So I'm going to cut right to the chase. The question that I have for you is, what else do you do for the world? What problem, do you all solve, right? Like, what impact do you have as an organization? Because today's, workforce wants more than just a paycheck. They want to know that the company that they work for aspires towards a greater good. There's a higher purpose to the work that they do above and beyond the scope of client service. And so
like a conscious capital type of concept. Yeah.
Precisely. And, I think consumers have figured out the power of their spend as well, right? They want to spend on brands that resonate with them and the ethos that they have and, the values that they subscribe to. So anyway, so all these observations were out there. In June of 2014, I'd done a volunteer event with City Harvest, which was really centered around childhood hunger, and where it brought the immigrant sort of like growing up in Queens back in the late 80s, 90s, it brought all of it back because I learned a very staggering statistic, and this is where Mohsen and I really bonded together. We live in this like unique period in the country's history where almost everybody agrees that there's an inequality problem in the country, but they disagree on how to solve it or whose responsibility it is to do so. So while that debate continues to forge on, um, the future of our country, the future of our cities, right? Kids are going hungry every single day. Pre-pandemic, roughly 13 to 14 million children in America under the age of 18 experienced food insecurity. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And if you kind of like dig a little deeper and sort of peel the layers back, you start to also realize that New York City is also home to roughly 500,000 children that go hungry every single day. And New York City, this is arguably the wealthiest city on earth, right? It's the capital of like, commerce and whatnot. And you start to kind of understand why kids go hungry, why this kind of one of the root causes of inequality continues to manifest in our own backyards. And all of us kind of just go about living our lives because, it's not that people don't care about it. It's because there's just a lack of awareness that childhood hunger exists in our own communities, in our own backyards. And if you and me and all of us collectively don't work towards fixing this major problem, these are the kids that are going to grow up to be, academically disadvantaged and then potentially uncompetitive in the workforce. And by the time it becomes a problem, it's very expensive, or just there's an unwillingness by different parties to want to do that.
So what was the catalyst that, motivated you to abandon your investment banking career and figure out, how to use the market to solve this problem?
Yeah. So, as I was saying, in 2014, I was hit by a car when I was crossing the street. And I almost lost my life. I did everything right. I had the walk sign. I was on the crosswalk. It was a quiet Saturday morning. And an 87-year-old came speeding down 54th Street, turned onto 2nd Avenue, and my head goes through the windshield. I go flying off the car. And I get to the hospital. They tell my wife that they don't think I'm going to make it. And we hadn't been married even like a year at the time. So it's all crazy. And I remember waking up and being like, I have all of these things that I want to accomplish, all of this impact that I want to have. But like oftentimes, especially on Wall Street, there's so many talented and just compassionate people on Wall Street. I know it doesn't go, when you hear Wall Street, you don't really kind of put that together, but there's such talent out there that really does want to make a difference. But oftentimes, because of the high pressure environment and whatnot, all of us get put into these buckets where it's like, oh, I'm going to do this later. And we all end up in this thing called like what I like to call a deferred life plan. And so I remember waking up in the hospital, not being able to feel anything from the neck down. And there it really sort of hit me. And, you start to go, I don't know how long I'm going to live. And I don't want to also stay here and like lament this situation. And I know it sounds kind of like cliche, but I really do believe that gratitude and positivity, they're the greatest healers. And so all the things that I just mentioned to you about my own upbringing really sort of flashed in front of my own eyes at that moment. And it was like, in a weird way, it's very natural to ask, like, why me, right? Why do I have to keep going through these types of things? But then after you go through the acceptance and like, okay, what do I do from here? I can't control what happened, but I sure can control how I react and like how I choose to live my life going forward. And I remember thinking, like, in a weird way, what the doctor said to my wife, like, we don't think he's going to make it. How many times have I heard that throughout my whole life? You're not this enough. You're not that enough. You're never going to make it, right? And every time that you've ever heard that, and this is a story of anybody, any entrepreneur, anybody who's ever went through anything in life, we have all heard at some point, you're not going to make it. And those of us who have been able to prevail over those adversities, the story is actually very simple, right? You have all said, look back at that challenge and said, watch me, right? I'm going to make it. Not consciously at that moment, but you said, you know what? I'm going to figure out something, right? The Japanese have this saying I like to tell my team, fall 7 times, stand up 8. Doesn't matter how many times you fall, you just have to just get back up one more time.
Right.
And so to me, it was more like, if I get this like second, third, fourth chance, however many chances I've gotten at life, if I get another chance to be able to stand and get feeling back in my body and stand and walk and think and do the things that we all sort of tend to take for granted, I'm not sure what it is that I'm going to do, but I'm going to figure out how to dedicate my career towards making a difference and really solving a problem in society. And, I do believe that some things were just meant to happen. And when Mohsin and I met, on the camp at Columbia Business School campus, it was just a random interaction. And then next thing you know, we grabbed dinner together, and then we're like, oh yeah, we have very similar ideas about the world. Let's figure out how to build this business together. So we combined forces, and I immediately noticed, like, wow, here's what a privilege, right? Such a talented person. Let's figure out how to do this. But the main thing that we saw in each other was not necessarily like the thing that's like on the surface, right? Talent, pedigree, whatever, all that stuff. It was more like, here's another person that you sit across from, and you realize very quickly at the core of what they want to do and the values that they want to kind of live by. It's really about making a difference in the world. And we started with the mission first. And so we took these observations that we made within corporate America, and we built a technology first platform. And it took us a few years because, building for enterprises is not easy. And getting their attention to understand what they want, that's also hard. So it took us a few years. And a lot of this was these personal relationships that, we had built up over the years in Wall Street and law firms that I'd worked with back in the day, investment banks. They all sat there and told us like what they needed and what the incumbent was not providing. And so we systematically took all this and we started building. And so
yeah. So maybe I'm not sure that we really covered it, but I'm sure the audience would love to know exactly what Sharebite does.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm not sure how many people in the audience have spent time in the legal and the financial world, but there's a very stay late at the office culture, especially if you're in New York and you work in finance or law or accounting.
And you don't want to go back to your crappy apartment anyway. So
well, exactly. The studio, like 300 square foot closet. Exactly. So you sort of live at the office, right? And, when you're a junior analyst or an associate, you kind of plan your day around that, evening meal, right? Where your firm pays whatever, $25, $35 for you to get dinner, because you are working those 80, 90, 100-hour weeks.
I can promise you that's across all verticals, not
really?
limited to finance. Absolutely. Yes.
So yeah, I believe that. I just think that because of those observations that we had made, not only at the user level, but at the administrator level, which I'll get into. And I remember probably for my whole career, in the financial world, I probably ate every dinner at the office, and we all used, our company sort of Seamless account. I remember we used to have Seamless back then, and every dinner that we ordered on the platform was on that platform. But you also heard nothing but complaints, and I heard those complaints every day, all the time, but no one would ever do anything about it. And so you start to realize, like, why is this company just a monopoly in the corporate arena? Why hasn't there been a single other company that's been able to compete with them? And the technology that we were using, and that probably it was still being used, was like state-of-the-art technology back in like 1997, right? So it's super outdated. It's just been sitting out there. So then you start to ask people, like, what do you think? I hate it. There's not a single person that liked the platform. Administrators didn't like it. So we're like, look, things need to change. Things need to change not only at the client level, but if you show up at the restaurants, you would hear these gut-wrenching stories from, restaurateurs, small businesses, And let's face it, right? Those of us who grew up in small business households, myself included, we know that the viability of any given family or any given worker at those small businesses, um, their ability to put food on the table is directly correlated to the success of that small business. And so we would hear stories from restaurateurs about, oh my God, I get charged 30% in, commissions. I can't even make any money. Back in the day, it used to be fine, but it just doesn't work anymore for us. But we have to kind of stay on this platform because it's our only way of, being relevant to corporate clients, because it's the only game in town. So that was back in like 2014, 2015, we heard those stories. And so look, we took all of these observations. There's kids going hungry, right? Companies want to make a difference, but like, as many of you all know, many of your companies that you work for, if they have a foundation, they probably donate millions of dollars to charity every year. You don't know about it because they all communicate that to you by sending you emails. And you're probably not reading those emails because you're focused on work. And that was the case from my experience, was that I was involved in many of those initiatives, but I barely ever got to understand it. So we took all of these observations and we said, you know what? Restaurants are struggling. They were struggling even pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. So restaurants are struggling. Kids are going hungry. There's a broad agreement amongst most Americans that there is an inequality problem in the country, and there's nothing controversial about feeding hungry children, right? It's just the right thing to do. And so, and then the fourth thing was, we're like, look, no matter what business we end up in, our business model is going to be about helping align the incentives for the private sector to undertake the burden of social good. And if we can accomplish that in a way where we're not actually passing a single penny of the cost of that social good back to the end user, you've really hit the holy grail of making a difference and having a scalable and leverageable impact. So by working with corporate clients, we said, you know what, we're going to take that collective purchasing power, of spending power of all of these companies that are out there, and use that as a force for good to drive value back to small businesses and to society. And it works.
Yeah, and so I would like to just, for the sake of time, because we only have about 30 minutes left, sure, in one sentence, let's tell the audience kind of like who Sharebite is. We definitely, part of the Series A is about being able to answer questions, definitely in regard to the raise of the Series A.
Sure.
I would love to kind of get into kind of the meat and potatoes of that as well.
Sure thing.
And I just want to say, one of the reasons that, we were so excited to add Sharebite to the Rain portfolio and so excited about this investment is that there was really a clear opportunity here for a 1 + 1 = 3, right? So taking the opportunity, but also creating value for all parties. The sort of positive social impact is just like an amazing externality that comes out of it, but really solving the problem using exceptional technology and using that, charitable aspect as a value driver for your corporate clients, which is pretty exciting.
Exactly. And so, and I'll answer both of your questions in a succinctly, really quickly. Sharebite is a mission-driven food ordering platform that is built exclusively for the workplace. And so whether you're in the office, whether companies are trying to bring employees back to the office, right, in the post-pandemic world, or there's a number of other use cases that we have as a platform, but it's genuinely not just a food ordering platform, but it's a holistic employee experience platform, right? The post-pandemic new normal. And look, returning to the office is not for everybody, but for the ones that are being asked to return to the office, the least your company can do is just feed you, because it's just the right thing to do.
And I can tell you that based on the information that we're receiving, a lot of people are actually looking forward to going back to the office because they're overworking in their personal space and there's kind of no boundaries anymore. And so I know here in Miami, we're seeing a lot of people reporting back to their office space.
Yes, exactly. And so That is correct. It's also, it's about mental health as well, right?
Yeah.
Because people are overstretched, and there's just, humans are built to sort of compartmentalize like things, work, personal, etc. And this pandemic has really blurred the lines between all of those.
Yeah. I'm very curious about, because what was so interesting to me is how Sharebite was actually capable during a pandemic when the offices were actually shut down, where you were still capable of doing a Series A. Like that to me is just a, first of all, congratulations. And again, as I'll duplicate what Erica said in regard to how we're excited to be a part of it. But I would love to just let the audience know kind of like maybe 3 pointers that you had to prioritize to actually raise a Series A during a pandemic, especially with a business model that kind of requires corporate America to be at their office.
Yeah, as you can imagine, right before the pandemic, we had just moved into Jay-Z's old recording studio, which is so that was a nice little, nice place. And we have a phenomenal culture at within Sharebite. The team is amazing. And I can't say enough good things about them. And coming to the office every week was like high fives and smiles, right? Because we were hitting brand new highs every week on week. Clients clamoring to get on and get onboarded. How soon can you get us on? And so when the pandemic hit, we saw what was basically, this like rocket ship all of a sudden go, nearly zero. And, there are a lot of companies in this space that probably, that don't do what we do, but, levered to the real estate, the corporate market, that took a very different approach. And they were all well-intentioned phone calls, but we got a lot of calls too. And that was like, hey, preserve the company's cash, mothball your operations for some time, furlough, whoever, right, that you need to. Your clients will all understand. Mohsen and I took a very, very different approach, because this isn't just about, I think, look, those of us who know, if you're in banking, pays just fine. The financial industry just pays just fine. And for us, this was more about something much, much different. And we wanted to show that pre-pandemic, we referred to the team as a family. We wanted to act like it through the pandemic. So I'm happy to tell you that we were able to weather this pandemic without letting go of a single person on our team because of the pandemic. Number two, oftentimes you hear companies, getting rid of employees and whatnot as the first kind of resort, especially during times of crisis. And I was a leveraged finance restructuring guy back in the day in banking. So I'm looking at this stuff and going, wait a second, in times of crisis, you need a stabilizing hand, right? You need people to know that everybody has a job. And that's essentially what we did. So on April 7th, 2020, we got on a Zoom call with the whole team. And I remember telling them, everybody has a job. And everybody, and just prove us right. And I also remember telling them, keep a journal, because you're going to be telling the story, to many other people going forward about how we were able to weather the storm. And so the team banded together. We got on calls with clients. First day of the pandemic, March 16th of 2020, we're the first and only company in our space that reached out to restaurants and said, we're not going to charge you a penny in commissions. And we pumped them with hundreds, maybe thousands of orders, right? Still coming in, but for different reasons, right? Which was, a lot of our clients reached out to us and said, look, it's a time of crisis. We want to give back. Frontline staff and first responders at all the hospitals, they're stretched thin. They're taking public transportation. And so there were clients that said, you know what? We're just going to order food on Sharebite. Are you able to help route these orders to the ERs? So between March and June of last year, our team, every single day, routed it was over 850,000, but nearly 1 million lunch orders to all the hospitals across New York City, waived commissions to restaurants, kept the team in place, provided relief for restaurants and first responders and frontline staff. We innovated, we listened to clients, we said, look, pandemic's going to be over at some point. Well, maybe not this year, maybe not next month, it will be over. How are you going to sort of bring people back to the office? Are you going to keep an office? Yes, absolutely. We're never going to get rid of our office. Okay. And then what? So we innovated and we took things out of our product roadmap and we prioritized it. And that Sharebite Stations concept, which is basically a shelving unit that sits at your office, but it's powered by our technology. So every single day, we rotate 3 to 5 restaurants, possibly more depending on the size of the organization. And as long as your order is placed by a specific cutoff time that your company sets, every food order, every lunch is then brought to your office in one delivery per restaurant. All of them are individually packaged, labeled, and sealed with your name on it and location. And they're brought up to your floor and put on these things called Sharebite Stations. And it's contactless pickup. And your company now gets to bring your employees back to the office and put you and feed you. And so
you were able to kind of take what you were doing and repackage it as a pandemic solution, which is pretty innovative and quick thinking, which is great. But also to genuinely really be helpful to your clients as they're trying to bring folks back to the office. But from a fundraising perspective, you know, how far were you guys sort of through your raise when the pandemic hit? And how did you deal with that uncertainty kind of from an emotional perspective and with your pitch to investors?
Yeah, so we were not far along in our cap raise at all. In fact, we had raised a little bit of opportunistic cash right before the pandemic hit. We didn't know that it was going to be the case, but it was really meant to be like, hey, we're going to do a much larger raise, because we were a few months away from profitability. And so the P word, profitability and startups don't really go hand in hand, but we're a super capital efficient business, right? And the business is predicated on doing the right thing for all of our stakeholders. So coming to the raise, the point of the raise is when we got to, I think late summer last year, we had a lot of clients coming back and saying, hey, we are going to bring our employees back to the office, but we're struggling because I'm not going to reopen the office without a food solution. Because what people don't understand is that if you don't have a plan in place to feed your employees, what's the number one reason why people leave the building? It's to go get food. And so if you're not minimizing the variability associated with people coming in and out of your building, and that means you don't want thousands of employees going up and down crowded elevators. You certainly don't want hundreds of delivery people waiting in your lobby. And if you have an on-site cafeteria, maybe you don't want to reopen that for the public, right? At least for everybody. So you want an electronic platform that sort of takes care of everything. We'd already built that out. And we said, you know what? Some of you are existing clients of ours. Let us turn this feature on for you. That was the game changer. And a lot of our existing clients alone were like, I had no idea you had this feature. And then we're like, oh, we have 1,000 other features. Let us show you, because we build this stuff. Every time a client wants something, we build it out. And thousands of different use cases. And the thing with building Sharebite is that this is not a problem that just money that solves it, right? It's not like a consumer platform that, hey, go acquire customers, this and that. You need to build for the enterprise, and you need to account for the multitude of use cases that enterprises want. And they're not going to tolerate hey, here's a beta version or alpha version of our product, test it out. If you don't like it, I come back to you a year from now. They want everything fully baked, and they want to know that other people are using it too, right? So it's a much, much harder way to build it. But once you've built it out, it becomes this recurring revenue business that, it's very tough to rip us out, right? So once companies use it, and why would they rip it out, right? They like the technology platform. They get all the same restaurants on the platform. They feel good about the give back component to society via a partnership with City Harvest, but also the restaurants also love it too, right? Because it's much fairer treatment, equitable treatment to restaurants. So it's really truly is a win-win-win model. And if all of that's not enough, the thing that makes us the gold standard of corporate food ordering technologies is really the combination that integrated the technology, but also the client service, right? The carryover from the financial, the banking training. We really treat every client of ours as if they're the only client that we have. And that's been the case since back when we only had one client, all the way to now, a couple hundred clients that everyone feels like they're taken care of. So it's best in class customer service, and it does it. So to come back to your question about Raise, it's really, people like to see momentum, and I think investors like to see it too. So when we spoke, we already, that slope had already kind of turned the corner, and it was going like this. And then people saw the vision for our Sharebite stations concept and how we were winning clients, not only in our core markets like New York City, DC, Chicago, but we had expanded nationwide, right? San Francisco, Oakland, Irvine, Charlotte, Austin. And they started to see clients go live there, brand new markets go live in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And they're like, how are you so nimble? Start doing diligence on us. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, this is definitely a business, because, and the founders of Seamless, the original Seamless Web, had invested in us, and they're part of the Series A raise. Till this day, there's still not been another company that's been able to successfully compete in the corporate arena with Seamless until Sharebite. And we're the first and only company that's ever been able to do that. And, the more...
the fact that the founders are investors actually speaks to your business model,
correct,
but also the team that you've put together. So
correct. It's always about the team. And I've worked with some phenomenal, super intelligent people throughout my career, prior to Sharebite. But gosh, like, this is and you've had a chance to meet this team. It's talent, it's passion, but like what really gets them going is the mission, right? The people that we have at Sharebite are willing to unsheath Excalibur against the injustices of the world. And so what really gets them, motivated and, solving problems, and what's really been like the single most important decision that we have ever made as a company is the way that we've hired the team. And it's a it's a 3-pronged hiring process that we take. Can you do the job, or can you be trained to do the job? Number 2 is the cultural accretion, right? Are you a good cultural fit? And number 3 is a must-have. What does the mission mean to you?
right.
And what do helping small businesses mean to you? So,
from a Rain Ventures perspective, one of the most impressive things that Eric and I discussed about Sharebite was, here you are able to, pivot quickly, bring this social impact even deeper during a pandemic, stay to the mission, keep the team intact, raise money, but then you go a step further and you look at your cap table for your Series A and you say, no, you know what? From an intentional perspective, I need someone like a Rain Ventures on the cap table. And, I think that that's a very important conversation as, founders are raising Series A, that they're also not just thinking about getting the money and keeping the company going, but that they're taking the extra steps. And so I would like to know kind of like, if you're speaking to founders who are doing a Series A, what would be like one great piece of advice about the cap table?
I actually spend time, advising, startup founders and CEOs. The first thing that I always tell them is like, it's never about the money. It's never about the money. And it's about the type of people that you're going to have in the cap table. Because at the end of the day, you have to realize like your cap table, once you have that person in the cap table, they're there forever. They're there for good, right? It's nearly impossible to get them out. And so you have to, as much as important as it is to go to a potential investor and convince them to take, to put money into your company, it's also equally important for you to vet them as somebody who's going to be supportive to, to you and the business when things are going great, but also when things are not going so great, right? And so the decision that we took, and the rubric that we used was, we want to focus, because mission driven is not just about like the charitable donation that we make to City Harvest, but it's just about doing the right thing. But when you start thinking it from that perspective, suddenly the subject matters of like inclusiveness, diversity, equity, all of those things just naturally happen because you've now focused on sort of doing the right thing. So when we thought about raising capital, we took a very, very strategic approach in the sense that we only wanted to raise money from people that would actually be helpful to the business, right? Number two, if they couldn't be helpful at this very moment, can you be helpful later down the line? Or can you help us with things that we may not right at this moment think about that we need, that we need help with? Would you be able to help us out down the line? Can you make introductions, do this, do that? Mm-hmm. And so we have made it a point every single capital raise to make sure that we do our best to raise from women, right? Not just any women, but women that are like accomplished executives. It's not like, hey, I know a woman here, like you just, it's not that, right? It's, you want to make sure that you bring the best people into your cap table. And it's not about the money. It's about how they can help you build the business and think through it strategically. The money will come. The money always comes. It's a byproduct of creating value for your stakeholders. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, to answer your original question, we've been focused on value the whole time. And the money, when it came, it was, we were oversubscribed on the raise, right? It was like, suddenly we had crossed the chasm, and we looked back and we were like, we didn't do this for the press. We didn't do this for anything. Frankly, we never put out a single piece of press until probably late last year. And so we did it because it was just the right thing to do as a business. We've quietly built, I think we've built a behemoth within the corporate food ordering space. And we're well on our way to becoming, the next unicorn within our space. But we did it because we did it by focusing on value, not just to one stakeholder, but for all stakeholders. So bringing in, diversity into our cap table, not just diversity on the outside, the way people look or their gender or whatnot, but also diversity of thought, right? Mm-hmm. Diversity of backgrounds, people that are willing to put a little bit of money in and also pick up the phone and make calls and help you, get to where you need to go or make introductions. That has been the single biggest game changer for us as a company.
I think that's such a great point, because I think when we, especially now that since this, diversity and inclusion conversation is at the forefront, I think that people have gotten stuck with kind of like the way you look. And honestly, you need diversity of thought. That's really important. You need diversity of experience. And the more we create cap tables like that, in my opinion, the more successful the companies will become. And again, from a holistic, right, which means healthier ecosystem. So I know, Erica, I think we have a couple of questions in the audience.
So would love to, so first of all, we do have to wrap a little bit before 4 today. But I just want to make sure that anyone who has a question in the audience, if you want to, put it in the chat or the Q&A, we can get that answered. But as we're wrapping up, I'd love to get your, top tips on what you experienced during the fundraising process that, was a surprise to you, and, what would be your top piece of advice for founders who are out there trying to raise money right now?
So the single biggest surprise, there are a lot during capital raises, but for me, and this is not just this raise, but prior raises. And I think I saw a question: did we have a pre-seed and seed? The answer is yes, we did, but we've never sort of publicly, sort of disclosed any of that stuff. This is the first raise that we've ever put out publicly, but oftentimes, like, you really don't know there's one situation many years ago where I thought I knew the person, you know, just kind of whatever. And, you know, you sit in front of them and they start saying things that you're like, whoa, 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 look, that's not the type of company I'm trying to build. Because like at the end of the day, it's your life, right? You're putting your everything into building this business. It's your baby. You're doing everything it takes. You're making sacrifices. You're probably even destroying your health to build it. Yes, it's their money, but you don't get your life back. You don't get your time back, right? They may not get their money back, but you know what? They can recover from it because they're accredited investors. They know what they're doing, and it's generally just a loss for them, carry forward loss. For you, it's your life. And so if you're going to work for somebody, and when you work for somebody, yes, it's your business, but when you take external money, you are working for them because you're now their fiduciary. My biggest recommendation to founders, whether you're early stage or, you know, Series A, Series B companies, is that remember the sacrifices that you're making, the late nights, the sleepless nights, and all that stuff, is directly as well as indirectly helping enrich people in your cap table. So make sure when you take money from people that they are worthy of being enriched, right? And that you're proud to sort of make them make them wealthier, right? Because if your company is successful and you're able to prevail and make it, that you're proud to say, you know, Monique, Erica, like, I'm so glad that like we worked hard. I'm so glad that your investment is worth a lot more today than it was when you made it. Because I know for a fact that, you know, Eric and Monique are going to now deploy that capital, whatever they ended up gaining, towards funding more and more people that want to build impactful businesses. And that's the rubric that we've used at Sharebite when we've taken money from investors. It's like, hey, what are you going to do with the money, right? One day. I know it's like getting ahead of yourself, but it's totally okay for you to vet the investor just as much as they're doing diligence on you.
You know, clearly with Erica and I having done this for such a long time, and Erica longer than I, one of the consistent themes that we've interacted with is exactly what you're talking about. They were stressed. They made very urgent decision on the cap table. And now how do they get out of this partnership? Yeah. And the fact that you are prioritizing that and did prioritize that is super amazing. And it is a little more uncomfortable, right? Because the process is longer, but you're right. It does impact all of the stakeholders who's on the cap table and what happens after the company starts scaling and getting better and growing. You have to consider all of these things.
Correct. And we feel the exact same way about our limited partners. Yes. I know there are some of them in the audience today that we're working for. So we work for you guys.
Yeah. But even with that, you know, as Rain Ventures, as you know, we raise money. These are the things that we actually consider and think about and make decisions about. Who are we in partnership with? And yes, on the founder side, on the investment side, on the team side, it is truly a partnership.
Yeah. Exactly. And, you know, starting a company is genuinely an irrational decision. It really takes, I tend to think of myself as a rational person, but, you know, other people may disagree. But, you know, starting a company or doing something like this for both Mohsen and I, we joke about it, right? We both say like, hey, this is sort of an irrational decision, but I would not have changed anything about it, right? I would have still made that same decision because it takes a long time. It's very, very hard to build a company for those of you who've built one, and let alone like achieving product market fit and then getting into scale mode. And there are different problems that you sort of have to deal with at every turn of the corner. But, you know, it all comes down to the conversation was about raising capital and how you're able to do it. If I had to sort of, not to be overly reductionist here, but like if you were to, you know, focus on any given thing, you really, my recommendation is you focus on solving a problem for your clients, because they don't care about your story. They don't care about your company. They don't care about anything. What they care about is, and they should, and the only thing that they care about is their problem. And if you're solving their problem and you're able to make life easier for them, or, you know, help them de-stress their own lives in some capacity, that's real value. And then you start to kind of take a higher level view and say, well, what other problems are out there and how can I use this platform to solve those problems? Once you've solved that problem, the money sort of takes care of itself. A lot of times, you know, people, there have been times throughout our journey where we've had inbound interest from investors, like, hey, can I invest? And whether we were raising or not, that's a different story, right? So we're laser focused on solving a problem. And the decision that we made to keep our team and all the things that we did last year. Oh, by the way, there's a question about City Harvest. You know, the last day of 2020, which is arguably the hardest year that many people have had on record, we made a donation to City Harvest that resulted in nearly 400,000 pounds of food that went to help feed children facing hunger. And to me, and I'm going to speak on behalf of my co-founder Mohsen and us as a company, as the whole team, we cannot think of a higher calling than to give back to our cities and to our country at a time that it needs us the most. And the fact that you've got an immigrant and the son of of immigrants sitting here building a business, a for-profit business that is mission driven and its purpose, with the purpose at the core of it, I really think that's a very fulfilling thing to, you know, continue to do and continue to build. And you know, with all the success that we've had, we kind of look back and go, wait, it's kind of strange. We're only just getting warmed up, right? We have so much more to go. And,
Yes.
And so that's the exciting part about this whole journey.
Well, I have to tell you that we are so excited to have you as a founder and your co-founder and your team. I personally was able to interact with your entire team virtually. So I know the type of amazing people that you actually have as your community. And we are so excited to have you as a partner at Rain Ventures. We're excited for our LPs to understand who you are as a human and what your company stands for. And I believe that this is the very beginning of this corporate shift of capital, of a conscious capital, and just doing good all around, and everyone as a stakeholder benefiting in a positive way. So me personally, I'm just so honored that you allowed us to be a part of your cap table.
Yeah, and we really appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing your story of inspiration and success with the audience. And to answer JD Davis's question, here at Rain Ventures, we do invest at the seed stage. And in fact, that is our specialty. We invest at the seed stage in consumer tech and software companies that are solving big problems for people. So if you're interested in learning more about Rain Ventures, visit our website, rainvc.com. And if you're interested in learning more about LP opportunities in Rain Ventures, you can also visit our website and respond to the survey that will come to attendees after today's session. So thanks everybody.
Yes, and anyone on that is in the office needs to sign up for Sharebite. It's amazing, and you can do good at the same time. So
thank you all. It's our honor and privilege and pleasure to have you all involved with Sharebite. And you know, it's a testament to who you both are as human beings. So it's we're privileged to have you involved here. And our journey, as I said, our journey is only just getting started. So much more to come.
All right.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.